Hello and welcome to this Simply Rhino video created for you by our team. We trust you'll find the video useful and that you enjoy the content we've created for the Rhino and Grasshopper community. If you'd like to know more about the Simply Rhino team, the Rhino and Grasshopper training we offer and the events we organise, we'd invite you to visit the Simply Rhino website. Now, please go on and enjoy the video.
Hi, this is Phil from Simply Rhino, and in this video I'm going to take a look at Enscape, which, as you probably know, is a very popular real-time visualization tool for architecture. Enscape allows for the easy creation of rendered still images and animations, as well as the ability to walk around the model in Enscape using either the mouse and keyboard or compatible VR headsets. I won't be covering the VR capability, but for reference, Enscape works with either the Meta Quest 3 or HTC Vive Pro 2 products. I'm going to look at Enscape very much from the perspective of a Rhino user, and the good news is that we can do a lot of the work from inside Rhino, as Enscape is a true plugin, tightly integrated within Rhino. You'll see as we progress that we can do a lot of the navigation, creating views, setting sun location, time of day, and applying materials, all directly inside of Rhino. The starting point here is this model of a building, and if I switch to Rhino's rendered viewport, you'll see that we have a neutral scene with just the default white plaster material applied to everything other than the glass elements of the building. Currently, these are standard Rhino materials. If I zoom out slightly from here, you'll see that I've put this building on a small area of terrain, and the terrain is raised up slightly, so that Z0 is the bottom of the terrain. This isn't a requirement, but I find that with these real-time visualization tools that use an image map or sky dome for the background, then this can help to avoid seeing the horizon line or sky cutoff in the background. Once installed, Enscape has a simple toolbar, and the first tool here allows us to start Enscape. And once open, we'll see an image that looks very much like our Rhino rendered viewport, except that we've got a sky and horizon already in place. Now, if you're used to rendering in Rhino, the good news is that you don't need to learn too many new processes, as most of the navigation can be done in Rhino. You can, of course, navigate in Enscape directly with the commonly used WASD metaphor. W will zoom, A will move to the right, D to the left, and S will zoom out. Dragging with the left mouse button is look around, and we can use the right mouse button to orbit. And finally, we can hold down the Shift key and the right mouse button and drag to advance or retard the time of day. Now, of course, we haven't set up any sun location yet, but this is nevertheless a quick way of moving through the time of day. Looking at more of the tools on Rhino's Enscape toolbar, this third tool along allows the view between Rhino and Enscape to be synchronized. So if I move the view in Rhino, I'll see the corresponding view in Enscape. The reason I like this is because there's a lot of ways of manipulating the view very precisely in Rhino, including snapping to geometry or points in space. The previous tool here toggles between enabling or disabling live updates. When enabled, if I make any geometry changes in Rhino, I'll see them immediately in Enscape. We saw earlier how to move through the time of day in Enscape, but the really good news for Rhino users is that the location, date and time can be set in Rhino, and Enscape will update in real time. So I'll open up Rhino's sun panel and set the location to London and the date to August of this year. And as I move the time slider, the Enscape live view responds in real time. The sky will darken as we move from dusk to night time, and if I adjust the view here, you can see the sun object in the sky also moves with the time slider. Of course, all of this should perhaps be expected, but what's impressive is how quickly the Enscape viewer reacts to those changes made in Rhino. To make changes to the sky texture and background, I'll need to open the Visual Settings tab in the Enscape viewer. I'll maximise the Enscape viewer, and when I do this, all of the various Enscape tools will be visible in the top section. If you have two monitors, then running Enscape in maximised view on a second screen works really well, as it leaves the Rhino viewports uncluttered. The visual settings are here. In the style options, I can choose a cartoon style like sketch or watercolour, but for now I'll leave this at none. I can also add outlines with a slider, and in some cases this can improve readability. I'll look at this later when I've added more detail to the scene. Auto exposure works well for most exterior scenes, and if this is enabled, the slider underneath controls the brightness of the image. The Image tab allows for more detailed image corrections and effects such as motion blur and lens flare. Atmosphere has controls for fog, illumination and wind, but the main tab I want to look at here is Sky. Here I can adjust the various aspects of the clouds and make changes to the background that is used with the Enscape sky. I can choose to use the default neutral horizon or a specific HDR skybox. These are available from a number of sources, and it's also possible to create your own custom skyboxes. But for now, I'll use one of the included backgrounds, and here I think I'll settle on forest. This background can be rotated independently of the sky and is useful for filling in the extended context beyond the modelled landscape. So, to recap, the workflow so far is to set the location, date and time in Rhino, and then refine via the Enscape Visual Settings panel. One thing I think it's important to point out is that if you advance the time of day in Enscape, then this doesn't change the time in the Rhino settings. But if we go back to the Rhino Sun panel and adjust the time, then Rhino and Enscape will be synced up again. So this is something we perhaps need to be careful about when we save out, for example, an animation. Let's look now at applying materials. Looking at the rendered viewport in Rhino, there are just two materials applied here at present: the default white material and a glass material. Both of these are Rhino materials. There are two Enscape toolbar icons to look at here. This is the Enscape material library, and this is where we can import predefined materials from a large library. This next icon here is the material editor, and this is where we can adjust materials once they've been brought into the project. Essentially, there are two ways of applying materials, but they are always applied to the geometry in Rhino. Method 1 is to change an existing Rhino material to an Enscape material. I'm going to select an object with the Rhino glass material applied to it, and then change the name to Glass Enscape. And then I'll change the material type from glass to Enscape. If I then open up the Enscape material editor, I'll see the Enscape glass material in the list. At the moment, this will be a generic Enscape material, but I can change the material type to glass. Next, I can darken the base colour, increase the IOR slightly, and then bump up the specular highlight value to make the reflections more prominent. When I then manipulate the view so that the reflections can be seen in the glass, this now looks much more dynamic than just using the previous Rhino material. Method 2 is to import an Enscape library material into the scene. I'll open up the library and choose Brick 11 as an example, and then Import Selection, and close the Enscape library. Back in Rhino, I'll manipulate the view and choose an area of the wall onto which I want to apply the brick texture. Once I select the wall, I can apply a material via the Properties panel, and I'll see the Brick 11 material in the list of available materials. If you prefer to apply from the Rhino Materials panel instead, then the imported material will appear in there too. Once applied, we can see that the brick texture is uncontrolled, as by default this will use Rhino's UV or surface mapping. With rendering in Rhino and using Rhino library materials such as brick, these are automatically mapped with a WCS box style mapping, which basically means that the brick texture has an idea of its real-world size and orientation. A similar methodology can be used in Enscape. To do this, we can open up the material editor, select the Brick 11 material, and change the texture coordinate system from Object to World Box. Of course, for more controlled mapping, I can use Rhino's texture mapping controls, including the mapping widget, and when I choose Object in Enscape, the mapping set in Rhino will be carried over to Enscape. As an example, here I've changed the material to a concrete panel, applied box mapping in Rhino, and set the size and position of the texture with Rhino's mapping widget. When I see this in the Enscape viewer, you can see the result matches that of Rhino. As I continue to add materials to the scene, there are a couple of other things that may be useful. You can duplicate neutral coloured Enscape materials like plaster or concrete from inside Rhino and then add colour to them by using this tint setting here. This is a quick way of having different coloured versions of the same material. Note that you can't duplicate materials from inside Enscape, and this has to be done via Rhino. Note also that Rhino materials are approximated in Enscape. Here we have a Rhino metal material, and you'll notice that if I change the type from Rhino's metal type to an Enscape material, how the reflections improve. Once this material has been converted, it's then possible to swap it out for another Enscape material in the material editor. I can do this by right-clicking on the material name and selecting Replace with Enscape Material. Note that going this route doesn't change the material name, however. Finally, there's one other material type I'd like to look at, and that's the grass material. I'll start by applying a new Rhino material to the landscape here, then give this a dark green colour and rename it Landscape, and then finally change the material type to Enscape. Then, from inside the Enscape material editor, I can change the material type from generic to grass, and we can see that this creates a three-dimensional texture. If I zoom in, you can see how I can change the height of the grass and also the variation, so that the result looks less manicured. I can, of course, change the colour too. When I move the view, we'll see that the grass is animated and responds to the wind. And there are a couple of other special material types that could be considered to be in a similar category. The first is water, which is again animated. And there is also carpet, which of course is similar to grass in the way it can be adjusted and controlled. Let's look next at adding Enscape assets. These include people, furniture, lighting, vehicles, plants and trees. Let's start first with people, And in my Rhino model, I've created a new layer called 006 people and made this the current layer. Now I'll open up the Enscape Asset Manager and choose People and select which one I'd like to bring in. The Asset Manager uses Chaos Cosmos, and you may be familiar with this if you're a V-Ray user. But note that the assets are handled differently in V-Ray to Enscape. If you've already downloaded assets, then you'll see this tick and the files will be stored locally. If not, then these will be downloaded on the fly when you select them. Once selected, I can click on the Rhino surface onto which I want to place the figures and then snap the asset into place. This is good because I then don't have figures floating above or below surfaces. In Rhino, the assets appear as low polygon meshes so that the Rhino file doesn't get too large. And they are also recognized as block instances. If I open up the Block Manager, I'll see the name block. It's very easy to fine-tune the placement of the figures with the gumball. So once again, the placement and manipulation is all done in Rhino, making the whole process very easy. I'll create another new layer and name this 007 Trees, and then make it the active layer. Using layers like this means it's easy to turn on and off various groups of assets, as they can sometimes get in the way of further editing of the building or perhaps even when creating detailed views. I'll open up the Asset Manager and choose Vegetation and then Trees. Next, I'll filter the results to show only animated trees. These will move slightly to respond to the wind. I'll choose 2 trees and add this one first. And once again, I'll snap this onto a Rhino surface. I'll then add the second tree next to the first. Note that as this one has been downloaded previously, the process is slightly quicker. Once again, the position and rotation can be fine-tuned with the gumball. If I maximize the Enscape viewer and open up the Visual Settings panel and then open up the Atmosphere tab, then you can see the movement of the trees as I move the wind slider. I'm now going to add more people and vegetation, but before doing this, let's take a look at adding some furniture. Once again, I'll create a new layer in Rhino and make this active, and then I'll head back to the Enscape Asset Editor and add this sofa, snapping it onto the floor plate surface. Then I'll switch to 4 view in Rhino and position the sofa in the top viewport. Now I'll switch back to the people layer in Rhino, go back to the Enscape Asset Editor and add a seated person. Because I can snap the figure onto the same Rhino surface as the sofa, then the figure should be sitting at the correct height. Once again, I can fine-tune the position in the top viewport by moving and rotating the figure with the gumball. And it's then important to look around in the perspective view just to make sure the seated pose looks correct. Because we can manipulate the Enscape assets directly in Rhino, it makes positioning these assets accurately relatively straightforward. So, I've now added more people, furniture and vegetation. Let's look at creating output from Enscape, and I'll start with outputting still images. I've synced the Rhino camera to Enscape so I can use Rhino's named views here to select the view I want to save out. And then I can open up the Enscape Visual Settings panel and make changes to the image, atmosphere and sky, as well as choosing settings in the Output tab. Here I can control image size and whether to add additional information such as material ID, alpha channel, etc., as well as choosing the output file format. I'll choose a simple PNG without any additional information, and then I can use this icon here to save out the screenshot. By default, this will save out with the date and time as the file name, just as View Capture to File does in Rhino. Here's the image at 100% in an image editor, and this looks pretty much the same as the Enscape viewer image. If I'd like to add some more realism, I can use the AI enhancer from this Enscape button here. What this will do is to first of all capture the project, and then I can upload this to the Chaos Cloud. Once uploaded, the render will be recreated, and when complete, the image can be downloaded. Looking at the two images side by side in an image editor, you can see how the grass is handled differently here. It's got a little more undulation and irregularity to it, and moving back to the original image, you can see what the AI is doing. It's leaving the building geometry and material types alone, but it's enhancing the vegetation and making some of the materials more realistic. And as I toggle between the images here, you can see the difference in materials, particularly with the glass elements of the building. Back in Enscape, I'll again open the Visual Settings panel, and let's now look at outlines. These are really useful to find and define the edges of the geometry, like these step details here. The slider-based control makes adjustment easy, and if we look at an example like the roof slab here, the outlines create a less photorealistic look, but without the outline edge definition, the details such as this edge and these steps are much less easy to read. If I wanted to depart further from what we're seeing on screen and can accept some arbitrary changes to materials and environment, then I can use Veras AI from this button. Once a license has been acquired, I can use these presets that have associated text prompts to modify the image. This first Enhancing Forest preset will put this model into a woodland scene in golden hour with, as it says, long, soft, diagonal shadows. And essentially, it's not going to take too many liberties with the geometry, but will make material changes. There'll be a delay whilst the render completes, and once finished, you can see that the AI has changed the surrounding context significantly. And although the building geometry is pretty much unchanged, there are significant changes to materials, with some panels that were glass being replaced by wood. Without wishing to comment on the merits or otherwise of AI, let's just say that by reining in the changes allowed, we can create an acceptably professional looking image. Let's look now at animating in Enscape. Back in Rhino, I have my date set to the 14th of August and the time at 2 p.m. And I'll want to use this date and time in Enscape. Enscape uses the concept of animating between keyframes, and I can use the Rhino named views to establish those keyframes. So I'll make sure that the render 1 named view is my active view in Enscape, and then I can open up the video editor. I add a keyframe by clicking on this plus symbol here. And let's say that I want to animate from my named views going from render 1 to render 3 and then to end up at render 2. I can double click here to get my next camera position. Click on the plus symbol to add another keyframe, and then the same here. I'll see the 3 keyframes in the timeline. 1, 2, 3. And the overall duration is set to 35 seconds. So I'll just change this to 40 seconds, and then to check on the keyframes themselves, I can click on the keyframe indicator here. I want to capture the time of day and the field of view, and then I can update and do the same here for keyframe 2. Now, of course, if I wanted to move through the time of day to do a sun study, then I can change the time here. But to keep things simple, I'll leave the time as is in all of the keyframes. Then I'll look at my last keyframe here, select the time of day and field of view, and then update. I can preview the animation here. I'll fast forward through this, and when I'm happy with the preview, I can export the project. I can choose the resolution, the compression quality, and the frames per second from this dialog box, and then I can save this out. The video path can be saved and reused by saving the path to a file here. I'll now close the video editor, open Visual Settings, and turn off the outlines. Finally, let's look at adding lights in Enscape. In the Asset Manager, there's a library of lights, including this outside light that I've previously downloaded and added to the scene. The lights are along this edge here, and they have an emissive material applied to them, so that when I turn down the time of day here, you can see these glowing in the dark. These lights aren't controllable as such, but they are useful for adding detail to the scene. For more general illumination, such as adding lighting inside the building, I can use Rhino lights, and here I've used a number of rectangular lights, and these will be recognised by Enscape. I've created some layers in Rhino so I can separate the lights by floor level. Now, if I go into the layers here and turn some of the layers on, you'll see the lights appear. I can set the colour and brightness in Rhino to start off with, and here they're set mostly at an intensity of 0.4, and I can also adjust the brightness in Enscape later on, should I wish. It's important that the lights are not too bright because I'd like them not to be visible in daylight. And you can see if I back up the time to earlier in the day, then this is the case. To control the illumination from inside Enscape, or to turn lights on or off, I can use this beta feature, Light Management, here. And you'll see that if I select a light, I can either see this by its CAD defaults or the light presets. And if I select a light here, I can, for example, turn it off. We do need to be careful with the brightness of these lights, and we do also need to make sure that they're not too close to geometry, as this can cause flashing or interference in videos. Rhino's emissive materials can also be problematic, so make sure to convert any of these to the Enscape self-illuminated equivalent. I'll turn off the Light Manager and manipulate the view to make it a little more dramatic, and then save this as another named view in Rhino called Render 04. And now I'll look at creating a single view sun study that will go into nighttime. So we'll see the building lights illuminate. I'll open up the video editor and create a new video path with two keyframes, one for the start of the video and the other for the end. For the first keyframe, I'll set the time of day to 4 p.m. and capture both the time and the field of view. And then for my second keyframe over here, let's set this to 11 p.m. and again capture the time and the field of view. And I'll then set the timestamp to 40 seconds and then update. I can again preview the animation, and I'll see the sun going down through the trees, and then as we get into darkness, the lights will gradually come on. It's important not to advance into nighttime too quickly, as there's a bit of a lag before the lights start to illuminate, and we don't want to emphasize this. So again, if we're happy with our preview, let's export this again and save out the video. In summary, Enscape offers a really good real-time visualization solution for Rhino. Whether you're navigating around the model on screen, saving out still images and videos, or using it in conjunction with a VR headset. Much of the navigation and control is done via Rhino, so if you're a competent Rhino user, you should be up and running with Enscape very quickly. So that's about all I wanted to cover in this video. Thanks for watching, and please feel free to leave any comments below. If you found this video useful, then please hit the like button, and remember that to keep up with the latest developments in Rhino, you can subscribe to this channel. At Simply Rhino, we offer training for Rhino and all its key plugins, so check out our website for more details. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch up with you in the next video.